honoring your cravings doesn't look like eating impulsively. Like every time you get a craving, you just go run to the pantry and eat whatever it is you're craving. It's pausing and reflecting and saying, what is this craving trying to tell me and how do I respond to it?
Hey, friend, this is Heather Creekmore. You're listening to The Compared To Show, and you just heard my friend Kirsten Schmidt. Today, we are having a engaging, enlightening conversation all about cravings. It's so good. And I asked Kirsten to stick around for another, it's like 10, 15 minutes and talk about holiday food cravings in a special little mini episode I'm putting out for my Patreon sponsors. So if you're interested in that, you can go to Patreon and just support the show, just a couple bucks a month. And you'll be able to have access to that and some other bonus content I put there as well. But today, Kirsten and I really break down, what is a craving? Is a craving a bad thing? Is it okay to give in to cravings? What does all of that mean? And I think you're really going to enjoy it. Hey, did I mention that the Body Image Freedom Framework is on like a Black Friday sale? Like, this is the best price I've offered it for yet. It's 30% off. Use the code THANKFUL. You can just choose the online course, or you can choose the online course with the group coaching component. Group coaching will start in January. Hey, people are getting set free through this program. I am having an amazing time working with the women that did the fall group coaching program. So many wonderful stories. I'm hoping some of them will come on the show and tell you about their wonderful journey. But for right now, I just want to give you an opportunity to get in. If you've been kind of feeling the nudge, it's time for me to do something. It's tried all the diets. I've tried all the things. It's time for me to really find something to help me find freedom from these body image issues that are bogging me down. This program was designed for you. It's a biblical journey. It's a spiritual journey. It's not about food. It's not about exercise. It's about what's going on in your heart. I hope you'll check it out. You can use the code THANKFUL, get 30% off. Only for a couple more weeks. So check it out, improvebodyimage.com. Welcome to Compared to Who, the podcast to help you make peace with your body so you can savor God's rest and feel His love. If you're tired of fighting body image the world's way, Compared to Who is the show for you. You've likely heard lots of talk about loving your body, but my goal is different. Striving to fall in love with stretch marks and cellulite is a little silly to me. Instead, I want to encourage you and remind you with the truth of Scripture that you are seen, you are known, and you are loved no matter what your size or shape. Here, the pressure is off. If you're looking for real talk, biblical encouragement, and regular reminders that God loves you and you're not alone, you've come to the right place. I hope you enjoy today's show, and hey, tell a friend about it. Kirsten Schmidt, welcome back to the Compared To show again today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back.
So last time you were on, you shared your story and we had, I think, a compelling conversation about just like the weird rules we have around eating and how maybe they aren't the healthiest thing for our body. But today I want to continue our conversation about cravings. Now, let me start off before I want you to kind of talk us through like all the different aspects to that. But before we go there, I want to just address what I think is an elephant in the room. And that is this concept that I believe Christian women have been taught that cravings are not just bad for you, not just unhealthy, not just something that could make you fat, but that they are somehow like antithetical to Scripture, that craving food is somehow sinful or evil. And there's a very popular book, and this, I'm going to mention it by name because otherwise you'll figure it out. And so I just want to be clear. There's a book out there, a popular book sold millions of copies called Made to Crave. And I'm not mentioning it by name to cause any shame or anything like that. But I feel like just even the title of that book implies that we should not crave food. We should only crave Jesus. And I think that sets up a false dichotomy because our bodies were also made to crave food. And there's a physiological aspect to craving food that God designed, right? Like God created our bodies. So that physiological aspect is not sinful. It's not shameful. And so, yes, to meet all of our needs, God is the one who needs to do that, right? We need Jesus to satisfy our innermost longings. But our bodies still crave food, and turning that off is probably actually not healthy for us. So, Kirsten, I set you up there. Go for it. Tell us what we need to know about cravings today.
Yeah, the way that you described cravings is perfect. That of course we need to quote unquote crave God, but we are also made to crave food. It is so important that we crave food. I would compare it to just, the urge to go to the bathroom. Those two signals by your body are on the same level. But we look at cravings as being this really bad thing that we're not supposed to have. And I think I mentioned last time that it really, the only time you don't have cravings is if you're struggling with an eating disorder or you're very, very ill. That cravings are actually a sign of good health. I think about if we taught kids how to be potty trained the same way we talked about cravings. So if a child had the urge to go to the bathroom, but they soiled their pants, in diet culture language, what this would look like is the parent would say, that was bad. You should never do that again and be good next time. And so what the child would probably do is eventually they'd soil their pants again. And the parent would say, don't do that. That's bad. Stop soiling your pants. And eventually the child would start to feel a lot of shame around this sensation to have to go to the bathroom. And what would end up happening is the child might start doing things to not have to go to the bathroom, maybe stop drinking water, start doing things that are not healthy. And then they would try to hold this urge as long as they possibly could until eventually they'd soil their pants. And then they would feel all the shame and they'd swear off soiling their pants ever again until it would happen again. But that's how we treat our cravings. I paint that picture because we know that the urge to go to the bathroom is very normal and that we need to honor that. And as a child, we're taught what to do about that urge so that you don't soil your pants. Cravings are the same way. Honoring your cravings doesn't look like eating impulsively. Like every time you get a craving, you just go run to the pantry and eat whatever it is you're craving. It's pausing and reflecting and saying, what is this craving trying to tell me and how do I respond to it? I think I need to highlight the difference between ignoring your cravings and eating impulsively, because I think a lot of times that is what people assume are the only two options. Either I eat whatever I want, whenever I want, or I suppress my cravings. But we have to understand that every single craving is a signal from your body communicating some form of an unmet need. A lot of times that's associated with food, but you can get a craving because you're tired. You can get a craving because you're stressed. We know these things, right? So that's why we cannot just impulsively go and eat food, because you might not be meeting the need. If you ignore your cravings, you're not meeting the need. If you impulsively give into your cravings, you probably won't meet the need. So what we need to do is build attunement with our body and start to learn to interpret our cravings. And so I'll give a good example of this. I get a lot of cravings around 3:00 in the afternoon. These are so normal, y'all. If you get 3:00 cravings, that's normal. That's a sign that your metabolism's working just fine. And so I know when I get a 3:00 craving that it means one of a few things. Either I'm legitimately hungry because it's been a few hours since I just ate, I'm tired because it's middle of the afternoon, or my body's craving some form of movement because maybe I've been sitting at my desk for a long time. And that doesn't mean I need to go work out for an hour. That could just mean I just need to go for a literally 2 to 5 minute walk and come back and keep going. And so when I get these cravings, and actually I just had this craving a couple weeks ago, but it showed up as chocolate. Like I really wanted chocolate, but I know myself well enough to know, okay, is this really about chocolate or am I actually hungry? And so what I did was I made myself a bowl of yogurt with some granola and some honey, because I recognize, well, it's been 3 to 4 hours since I've eaten last. It would be conceivable that I would just be hungry. So I made myself a nourishing snack with protein and carb and fat, and it tasted good. It was something that I actually wanted to eat. And then I reevaluated and I recognized, okay, I definitely think I was hungry. And in fact, I'm still hungry. So I'm going to give myself permission to eat even more. So I ate some more cashews and then I reevaluated, and that craving actually went away. And what I want to clarify here, though, because a lot of people, I don't want people to get this wrong and think, oh, she had a chocolate craving, so she ate something healthy instead. That's not what I did. What I did was say, okay, I have full permission to eat this chocolate. And if I want to eat this chocolate, I can go and eat this chocolate. But I don't think this craving's about chocolate. I am legitimately hungry. And if I just eat chocolate, I'm going to still be legitimately hungry. And so I need to eat something more filling. And sometimes your craving it will go away. I shouldn't say even go away. It's just that you've met the need that needs to be met.
Yeah.
If I would have impulsively said, okay, I'm craving chocolate, let me just go eat chocolate, I actually wouldn't have been satisfied because I needed a lot more food than just chocolate. And I also needed some protein and I needed some fat and I needed volume. But I still gave myself permission to eat that chocolate in the back of my mind. And so when I work with my clients, I have this cravings guide that I give them to help them understand their cravings, because it's really hard to understand your cravings when you're starting to learn this. And I make very, very clear to them, this guide is not to get rid of your craving. You cannot use this guide with the mindset of cravings are bad, and I'm going to use this so I hopefully don't eat what I'm craving. This guide is used to understand your cravings, which might mean you still eat what you're craving. Because if you recognize that you just have a taste craving, which is, I just want chocolate because it sounds good and there's no other reason, then eat the chocolate.
Yeah. Okay. So I write this story in my book that's coming out here in a little bit, the 40-day body image workbook. And I tell the story because I think a lot of women can relate to it. And I actually start the day, because it's 40 different days. I start the day by saying, today I ate a donut because it was the healthiest thing I could do. And I tell the story about being at school all day long. So, there definitely was some like stress or exhaustion, but it was also this like cold, rainy day in November. And I had bought donuts for my son's class at school and they didn't finish them. And so there were 3 left. And they had to sit in my classroom, these 3 donuts sat in my classroom for like all afternoon. So all afternoon, I see the donut box and I'm thinking about the donuts. Now, of course, I didn't allow myself to have one earlier in the day when everyone else had one, right? Because I was not going to have the donut. And then the day passes, I come home, I have this box still with the 3 donuts in it. And I made the decision to sit down at the table. I made myself a cup of coffee because, like I said, it was a cold, wet day. Made myself a cup of coffee, took one of those donuts, sat down at the table and ate the donut. And it was a little bit of a like phenomena in my life. That moment was because my normal would have been crave the donut, get home, eat peanut butter. Okay, peanut butter didn't do it, maybe eat well, I was anti-banana at that point, but or, maybe if I was going really wild, have a handful of chocolate chips, because that certainly was still going to be better than that donut. And then, then just eating everything in sight, but not the donut. And then sit down to dinner and eat more than I needed, but not the donut. And then like an hour after dinner, go and pick off a piece of the donut and eat that one piece. And then go sit down and then get back up and pick off another piece, eat it standing there, go sit down, come back the 3rd time. What the heck? Eat the last piece of donut. And probably by the end of that evening, I would have not just eaten the 1 donut, but I would have also eaten the other 2 donuts. I would have eaten all 3 donuts, plus all the other things that I ate to try not to eat the donuts. Right. And so I feel like, just from personal experience, like indulging, that's a horrible word for me to use, but affirming maybe the craving was healthier for me to just sit down and have the donut. And I've talked to other women who, I think the shame around cravings makes us not even sit down to eat. Right.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not supposed to have it, then I'll just eat it standing, and then it doesn't like counter. I don't know. Yep. Like maybe no one sees. I don't know. So I don't know. What are your thoughts about like my scenario, which I know is fairly typical? Like how would you classify that in the cravings world?
Oh yeah. And I have totally been there, been in your shoes. You eat everything in an attempt not to eat your craving. Right. And so what that looks like when you tell yourself that a food is off limits, your brain is going to fixate on that food because food is food to your brain. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a donut and a cucumber as far as as far as what should be better versus what you shouldn't have. Food is food to your brain. Of course, our body is going to process things differently, but food is food to your brain. And so when you tell yourself that this food is off limits, your brain's going to fixate on that food. And so it doesn't matter what else you eat. It doesn't matter if you eat chocolate chips that are even sweet like a donut. Your brain wants the donut. And also, none of these foods are a donut. They don't have the same texture. They don't have the same flavor. Taste cravings are legitimate cravings that if you want a donut because it's soft and it has this nice glaze and it's sweet in a different way than chocolate chips are, it tastes different, then that's what you need to eat. When we try to avoid the food that society has deemed as bad, not only do you end up fixating on that food and probably eating it anyways, but like you said, you end up eating that plus the whole kitchen.
all the food.
And if you would have just given yourself permission to eat the food, you probably would have, what was it like for you just sitting down mindfully and allowing yourself to fully enjoy that donut with no shame? Or maybe sometimes a little bit can creep in, but if you make that decision, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to enjoy this donut mindfully. What was that experience like?
It was good. Like, I think I actually tasted it and enjoyed it. I mean, the other thing, like, not to be overlooked, is my cup of coffee, because that is something that I don't normally do. Right. Part of it's just like my frugality. Like, I already used a K cup this morning. I won't use another K cup in the afternoon. I don't really need that second cup of coffee, like that kind of mentality. But it slowed me down because I had to wait for my coffee. Right. So I decided to have the donut and the coffee. And instead of starting in on the donut, like while standing, I put the donut on a plate, which is another thing that I wouldn't have normally done before. Right. Put the donut on a plate, and it sat there while I waited for my coffee to brew, and added my cream, and then sat down, and it was an experience instead of a shoving food in my mouth kind of thing. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, our body wants to feel satisfied and wants to feel like you actually ate something. And so if you're just either trying to suppress the cravings and eat things probably still mindlessly because you're trying to eat anything and everything but the donut, you're never going to feel satisfied. But then even at the moment you decide to eat the donut, like you said, there's all this guilt and the shame associated. So you almost try to make it as unmindful as possible. Like, if I don't think about it and I just have one piece and then maybe one more and maybe one more, then yeah, maybe it doesn't count or something like that. But that mindful experience that you talked about is so important for satisfaction, that it's okay to allow food to be satisfying. Like God never said, Jesus never said that we should not enjoy food.
Right. I love that you bring that up, because I talk about that in my new book too. And I think that's probably those are going to be the chapters I'm going to get the most pushback on. But that it's just that clear, just the way you said it. God never said don't enjoy food. Right. And I was thinking my follow-up question for you was going to be like, taste cravings. Like, doesn't that seem kind of like indulgent or, flesh satisfying? Like, I have a feeling there's someone out there that's been taught that taste cravings are sinful.
Mhm.
But that's how God created us
Yeah.
physiologically, right? I
Yes.
mean, our
And we are,
tongues wouldn't taste different. Like how many, I don't even know the number, but it's some crazy number of things that our tongues can taste, right?
right. If we weren't supposed to enjoy food, then I suppose God would have made it so we didn't have taste buds.
Right. We just have manna all the time, I guess.
The
Right?
reason we eat, and that's what's the important thing about cravings is we eat food that tastes good. And if food didn't taste good, we probably wouldn't eat it.
Mm,
And that wouldn't serve our health at all.
yeah.
So we need these cravings and we are supposed to enjoy food. And I actually think there's a spiritual component there. I always tell my clients to have dates with Jesus, where when you're struggling with mindful eating, because a lot our culture is so busy, and it's very a mindless culture, that when you sit down and you enjoy this food, make it like a date with Jesus, where he's sitting there and you're enjoying your donut and your cup of coffee with Jesus. You wouldn't stand up Jesus on a date if you wanted to go on a date with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so make it like a date with Jesus. I could not imagine Jesus walking through your front door and you sitting down with a cup of coffee and donuts and Jesus going, "Oh, this doesn't fit into my diet today.
Right.
Heather, you should not be eating that donut." He
Right.
would sit down with you with that cup of coffee and that donut and enjoy both with you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think I have 16 scriptures in my new book about satisfaction. And right there, there's scriptures about being satisfied in the Lord, being satisfied in God,
Mm-hmm.
but several of them relate that kind of satisfaction to food,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, if our relationship with food is black coffee, salad, no dressing, toast, no butter, although people don't eat toast anymore, like if it's a plain, choke it down, rice cakes relationship with Jesus, rice cakes relationship with food, like, is that what our relationship with God and Jesus is like too? Right? Is our relationship with Jesus a rice cakes relationship? Right? Is it like I can't be satisfied in him because I'm too worried about being lavished by him? I don't know. I feel like there's a connection there.
Yeah. Well, I think why people have such an issue with eating food that tastes good or allowing taste cravings is I think a lot of people assume, well, that just shows a lack of self-control. Mm-hmm. And I actually think it takes more self-control to sit down with a donut and coffee and eat that mindfully than to just suppress and ignore your cravings. We're actually very used to suppressing things. We're used to suppressing our emotions. We're used to suppressing our cravings. We're told that these things are bad. And I would say that in a way, it takes less self-control to just ignore and say, I don't want to deal with this craving. It's bad. I'm just going to try to ignore it because that's what's familiar to you. That's easier than sitting down and trying to either eat mindfully because maybe you feel too rushed or too busy, or to just try to interpret, what is this craving trying to tell me?
Yeah. Well, and like biblically, right? Self-control isn't even about that, right? Like we do need self-control, but like I think there's so much abuse of that term self-control as like meaning like to keep my body thin. Yes. And that's not what self-control is biblically. Self-control biblically is to keep me following Jesus and not over fixating on my body and what I look like, and helping me to love others as I already love myself and love God. And, it's like, it's not about controlling your food so that you can maintain a body size that will get you earthly glory. Like that's not what self-control is for. Yes. So I love that you went there.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-control really gets abused because I see all kinds of people practice self-control. That's not exclusive to Christians. A lot of people practice quote unquote self-control, but is it for self-interest?
Right.
But if you're sitting down, if you're practicing, self-control to sit down, to have a date with Jesus, that's not you oriented. That's, I want to have this date with Jesus. And that is hard, by the way. Yeah. So many of my clients struggle with mindful eating because we're not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it almost does feel like it takes some self-control to say, no, I'm not going to ignore my cravings. No, I'm not going to suppress my cravings. I'm not going to work while I eat for every single meal. Of course, things come up. We're not making this rule here that you have to always eat mindfully. But this busyness, this constant busyness, I think is more comfortable to people than to sit down and enjoy food with Jesus and make that meal about gratitude, because God provided that meal. To make that meal about gratitude, there is some self-control in there, but it's not oriented towards self. It is, I want to be grateful and share this meal with Christ or with my family.
Right. Which a lot of dieting women don't do. Right. Because you can't eat what the family's eating. Right.
Yes.
So that's a missed moment of, together time to, kind of be a family, a loving family. So that's hard. Woo. Kirsten, any final thoughts on cravings and all the things we've talked about?
I would say there's three big things that if you want to learn to start understanding your cravings that need to happen is number one, we've got to stop dieting. Because if you are restricting, you're never going to learn to interpret your cravings. Those two things do not go together. So that's number one. Number two, get rid of this idea that eating intuitively and eating your taste cravings is this indulgent, impulsive way of eating. That actually you can bring mindfulness and you can pause and you can learn to understand your cravings so that you're not on one end of the pendulum of suppression, but you're not all the way on the other end where I'm just eating whatever I want, whenever I want, and never paying attention to my body. But then the third thing is, and I'm sure you talk about this in your book, but we've got to learn to heal the shame around our bodies and not be so afraid of weight gain. A lot of my clients really struggle with interpreting their cravings. And the biggest barrier, it's not the food restriction. We move past that. It's not the impulsive eating. We'll move past that. It's this fear of weight gain. And in that example that I gave you where I went back for more food when I was still hungry. When you're dieting, or let's say you're not dieting anymore, you've ditched diets, but you're still afraid of weight gain. A lot of us wouldn't have allowed ourselves to go back for that second helping.
Right.
There's not that trust there with your body, and that God made your body intelligently. And so if we're afraid of weight gain, a lot of times that gets in the way of our trust for our body. And we need that trust because we need that relationship in order to learn to interpret our cravings properly. If there's any restriction or fear that I'm going to gain weight if I honor this craving, then you're not going to honor your cravings.
Yeah, that's good. Those are three good points. I was thinking on the last one, like how many of us trust whatever plan is that says this many calories and you eat these things, like we trust all of that, right? I mean, I talk to women who are like, oh, trust me, I'm eating enough. And I'm like, how do you know? Well, because, I'm matching this number, like whose number is that? Like, did they test you? Did they put you, they came into your home and they put you on like all these different machines to figure out your exact metabolic rate, which probably changes day to day, depending on where you are in your cycle and how much you move. But they did that. They figured out what that is for you. Well, no, but like everyone's saying the same number. Like, no, you will trust a stranger to tell you how much you need to eat and what to eat, but you won't trust the one thing that God gave you designed to tell you how much you need to eat. And that doesn't mean for some of us, it's not broken and doesn't need healing, right? Because I would say, like you said, if you've had an eating disorder or been dieting for 30 years, it might be broken, right? But it's fixable, but it might be broken right now. So, so it's okay to get help from people like Kirsten and others to help fix that. But it's worth it to to find food freedom and to find healing in this area. Oh, Kirsten,
yes.
thanks so much for being on the show today. Can you tell everyone where they can connect with you? Do you do virtual sessions with clients?
Yes,
Okay.
virtual. You can find me on Instagram at totus_wellness or on Facebook. It's just my name, Kirsten Schmidt.
Okay, great.
And then do you want me to share my website?
Yes, please.
Okay. My website is just www.totuswellness.com, and you can find more information there.
Wonderful. Kirsten, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was wonderful.
And thank you for watching or listening today. I hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye-bye. The Compared To Show is proud to be part of the Life Audio Podcast Network. For more great podcast content, go to Life.